for a number of years. So he finally went to the doctor, and the doctor was able to have him fitted with for a set of hearing aids. By the way, if you've seen the hearing aids nowadays, they used to be like big and bulky, and you know it's like there's a big huge thing hanging on your ear. But nowadays you cannot even see the hearing aid. It's all the way inside. Not that I have one, but I'm sure I'll have one at some point. But you know, it's all the way inside your ear, so no one will know that you have a hearing aid. But so this gentleman, this elderly guy, went to the doctor. And the doctor was able to fit him, or have him fitted for a set of hearing aids that allowed this old guy, an old gentleman, to hear 100% of what is being said or what is happening. A month later, the elderly gentleman returned to the doctor for a checkup, and the doctor said, "Sir, you know, we just checked your hearing, and your hearing is perfect. Your family must be really pleased that you can hear again." And the old gentleman replied, "Oh, I haven't really told my family yet that I have a hearing aid, that I can hear everything they're saying. I usually just sit around and listen to the conversations, and that's why I have changed my will 3 times." You know, the family thought the grandfather cannot hear everything, and maybe he can only hear endings or maybe just beginnings. Or some of you, you know, I will make fun of my mom, but she's not here. But she would tell me sometimes it's like muffled. She's saying that the sound is muffled. And so that's when you know that you need a hearing test, right? And so sometimes it's muffled, sometimes you only hear endings or maybe just the beginnings, or maybe they thought there are certain words that you catch and it invokes some sort of attention from you, and the rest, no one really knows, you know, what's going on. Or the person who cannot hear really doesn't know what's going on. It's like talking to me. If you start talking to me about numbers, you all know that by the 3rd number you would have lost me. If you tell me a series of numbers, like, you know, but if you try saying something like this, these numbers don't mean anything, I just kind of put it together. But if you try saying something like this to Pastor Jay, well, 35% of 70 is enough to cover the $550 I spent on 900 of those 1,000 cards. You start talking to me about that, and then randomly just drop inside that statement the words Korean barbecue, and you will get my attention. Right, Scarlett? Where's Scarlett? Scarlett? Oh, yeah, see? She's been asking me, when are we going again, Pastor Jay? So, you know, I love going with these guys to Korean barbecue because they know everything to order, and they even tell me all the hidden sauces that we don't know about, and they bring it out. Okay, we'll talk about that later on. But, you know, you will get my attention at the mention of Korean barbecue. You see, we many times read the Bible the same way. We like certain words, and somehow we stop and take what we get because we love those words, we like that thought, we love that idea, we like that promise, and we like certain words, as I said. It's called reading out of context. And that is not good. It is not good. It's called selective reading, and we all do it all the time. Take the case of this very, very famous verse. I know for sure because so many people take it out of context. I've done that many times as well. Take the case of this famous verse found in Romans chapter 8. And you probably know where I'm going with this. Romans chapter 8, and we're going to start from verse 28. We love this verse. Some of you have this verse as a promise verse or one of your life verses. But we love this verse because when things are not going right, we recite the verse most often used during these times. And this is usually what we recite. Romans 8:28 says, if you don't have your Bibles with you, if you do, I will wait for you until you open to Romans. But you can also be lazy and look up. Or some of you have your electronic things, and that's fine too. And it goes like this. And we know that in all things, God works for the what? For the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. It's a very famous verse. Like everyone knows it. And if you don't know it, highlight it right now and start knowing it. And we know that in all things God works for the good for those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. It's a wonderful verse, as I said. It gives a lot of comfort, a lot of peace to all of us. But almost always we stop there in Romans 28. We stop at the word all in all, and we know that in all things God works for the good. Many times. we stop right there. And almost always we stop there and never harvest the message, by the way, after 28. If we will only look at it with better eyes, if we'll only listen to it with a better hearing aid, if we will only look at it a little bit deeper, we might shift our loyalty to the next few verses, not really on this verse. Well, our message today is this: the believer's assurance. If you're a believer in Jesus Christ, if you believe the promise that He has in His Word, the message today is your assurance, despite the pain and the agonies of life, you will see the next promises kind of improves us or transcends us or make us rise above the difficulties or the testing or the pain that we are in. It makes us go beyond all things working out for good. What I'm trying to say is that it's wonderful to read 8:28. I'm not trying to dismiss that verse. But if you're a believer, you got that part already. Don't be selective, because the next couple of verses are probably going to be better for us. Are probably something that we need to pay attention to, and we shouldn't apply selective reading to. It makes us go beyond all things working out for the good. So why don't we read the next two verses after 28? That is 29 and 30, and this is what it says. For those God foreknew, He also predestined to be conformed to the likeness of His Son, that He might be the firstborn among many brothers. Verse 30. And those He predestined, He also called. Those He called, He also justified. Those He justified, He also glorified. And you might look at it like, oh, Pastor Jay, those are very hard words. Heavy-duty theological words. I'd rather stay with 8:28. All things work for the good of those who are called according to His purpose. And so, but if we really read that, and as I said, not apply selective reading or selective listening, you will see that there's so much hope in that for all of us. First, God works all things out for those who love Him, right? Who have been called according to His purpose. As I said in the beginning, this is the verse that many of us find comfort in. And our favorite verse is usually the first few words, God works all things for the good. And we stop there and go, yeah, I love that promise. That's wonderful. This bad news will turn to good news later on. That's what we're thinking, right? All this bad news that are happening in our life, if there's pain, if there's suffering, if there's like wrong turns or wrong decisions, we're going, oh my goodness, why did I do that? And then you go to this verse, you go, that's okay. Because those things that are happening in my life right now, whether they be bad news, pain, testing, failures, or whatever, all these things will work out for the good later on. I want you throughout this message to remember the second part of the verse, which is this: for those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. For those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. In fact, if you're the kind of person who likes to underline, meaningful things, the whole Bible is meaningful, but something that's very relevant and meaningful to you, I challenge you to, instead of underlining all things work for the good, to underline the words, for those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. You remember and I've said this, I was pretty much alive and grown up and all that in the year 2000. The reason I say that is because some people, I saw an advertisement on TV. It's like, this is how you get rid of 1993. As if 1993 was like this ancient year. And I go, that was just, I don't know how many more years ago, but that's the 90s. That's like New Kids on the Block. That's not too old. Why do people think that that's old? But it is. And I don't know if you remember the Enron scandal of 2001. And some of you may not know, because maybe some of you are not even born yet. But the Enron scandal in 2001, revealed in October 2001, eventually led to the bankruptcy of the Enron Corporation. It's an American agency, American energy, company based in Texas, I think Houston. And so not only did it drive that corporation to bankruptcy, it's an energy company, it also dissolved the accounting corporation of Arthur Anderson. You guys remember that huge accounting firm? I knew a person who used to come to church who was one of the accountants in that firm, and I'm like, wow. I thought, that's pretty good. But when the Enron scandal happened, it drove Enron into bankruptcy and also dissolved Arthur Anderson. And Arthur Anderson was one of the 5 largest audit and accountancy partnerships in the world. And in addition to being the largest bankruptcy reorganization in American history, at that time, Enron was also cited as the biggest audit failure that has ever happened. Simply put, it's a story of greed and more greed by people who are rich who want to be richer, who take the money over and above what they already have. That's not meant to be theirs. Instead, in fact, I'm sure some of you were kind of affected by that. Your 401ks or whatever retirement you may have. Enron's collapse alone took with it more than $60 billion in market value. Almost $2.1 billion in pension plans. And 5,600 jobs were affected. All because people have decided simply to lie, act out of greed, and pocket the difference. That's all. Very simple. And I remember I think it's Kenneth Lay. I remember one of them quoting this verse after he got convicted. In fact, he was being led out of the courtroom, and this is what he said. We believe that God, in fact, is in control. And indeed, He does work all things for good for those who love the Lord. And I go, did he just say Romans 8:28? He did. And many people, as I said, many people quote this verse, but there's a glaring truth that people forget. It should be noted that there is an important limitation of this great promise. God works all things out for good only to those who love God and are called according to His purpose. Now you might say, my gosh, Pastor Jay, how exclusive can you get? Well, I'm not the one who said it. The text, the verse says that to us. In the Greek, the phrase of those who love Him is placed first in the sentence. So it reads like this. Of those who love Him, all things work out for the good. There's a big difference when you're reading the original text. Listen to this. Of those who love Him, He puts the limitation first, and then He gives you the promise, all things work for the good. Scripture makes the unavoidable point. God only looks after the affairs of the person who loves Him. Person who loves Him. Simply put, if a man does not love God, does not want to place his life into the hands of God, how can God take care of that person? It's a very simple question, isn't it? If the man turns his back and walks away from God, how can God look after that man? I mean, He still does. But this man has completely said, I'm not going to go that way. God is not going to force His care or His love upon any of us. The person who truly loves God and is living a godly life is the person who experiences all things being worked out for his good. It is the godly person who loves God that will be delivered from the struggles and sufferings of this corrupt world. So if you love the Lord, all things will work out for you. If you love the Lord and decide, He is my God, all things will work out for you. Secondly, the second assurance, if you love the Lord will fulfill His purpose on you. Because He said, not only are those people who love the Lord, all things will work out for good, right? Not only them, but also those who are called according to what? To His purpose. Called according to His purpose. So look at verse 29. And this is when the big theological words come in. That's okay. We'll try to kind of, not dumb them down, but make it a little bit simple for us. Those God foreknew, He also predestined to be conformed to the likeness of His Son, that He might be firstborn among many brothers. This passage is often abused and misused because of the word predestined. Another word for predestined is predetermined. You have been predetermined to do this. You know those stories of, here's an example. You know those cultures where you have arranged marriages? You know, from the time that you are young, you already have a predetermined spouse. You already have a spouse that's being linked for you. You know, we kind of have that kind of arranged marriage here in this church. It's called Kayleen and Rachel. No, I'm just kidding. But you know, that could be one. But you know, because they're always out on a date, always around that other church. So maybe they have an arranged marriage. But that's what it is. It's a predetermined spouse for you when it's time to get married. But that's the word predestined. And based on this verse, many Christians believe that the Lord has chosen some to go to hell and some to go to hell, often known as the word predestination. It implies that God has determined ahead of time who is going to heaven and who will not. So then this text, does this text mean that those God knew already or predetermined, He already ordained or He already knows who they are? First of all, the word for knew means God knows not just future events, but He already knows the future of each and every one of us. He knows your future. He knows my future. He doesn't force us to choose to love Him, but I believe He knows if we will choose to love Him, and to those who decide to love Him and trust Him and have faith in Him and accept Him, and to those who decide to follow Him and put their trust in Him, He already knows that. He predestined or foreordained, or there's another word, to be conformed to the likeness of His Son. If you love the Lord and He knows that everyone who trusts Him and decides to love Him, you will also get the likeness of His Son. Conform to the likeness of His Son. In other words, those He knew beforehand would love God. He decided that they will be conformed, or they will be like the image of His Son. The only thing predestinated is that those who love God will be Christ-like. That's the promise. That if you love the Lord, He already knows. That if you love the Lord and put your trust in Him, He knows that your future will be, you will be made, or you will be likened or conformed to the image of His Son, Jesus Christ. That's what it is. So, okay. You know, I hope you're not lost yet. So now you're like, for those who love the Lord, called according to His purpose, He also has a promise to you that you will be conformed to the image of His Son. And then the third assurance of our text is that God gives glory to the lover and believer of Jesus Christ. And that is found in verse 30. So go back to your verse. And this is what verse 30 says. And those He predestined, remember the people, if you love the Lord and put your trust in Him, you are the predestined. And those He predestined, those who decided to follow Him, He also called. He also called. He didn't just, He's not just going to conform you to the likeness of His Son, but He will also be called. Not only will you be called, you will also be justified. You will be declared not guilty. That's what it is. And those He also justified, those He justified, He also what? Glorified. So look at those promises that you're going to have. If you decide to follow the Lord and put your trust in Him, now you will be predestined to be conformed to the image of His Son. But not only that, those who decide to follow Him will also be called. Those He called, He also justified. Those He justified, He will also be glorified. Remember now, the scripture is talking about the genuine believer. The genuine believer is a person who sincerely believes in Jesus Christ and seeks to please Him. Yeah, it sounds a bit exclusive, but it's true. It's true. The genuine believer has been predestined to be glorified. A true believer can rest in this glorious truth that if you love the Lord and put your faith and trust in Him, not only will you be conformed to the image of God, you'll also be called, you'll also be justified, you'll also be glorified. God has called, justified, and glorified Him. The assurance is this: even though your life is hell right now, if you're a lover of Christ and a true believer, these three steps are something already accomplished. He already knows it's going to happen to you. The believer's glorification has already taken place in the plan and mind of God. That's what it means to be predestined. To be predestined. God already sees the believers glorified. He already sees